Not bad. That's not bad. Brand new graphic, brand new intro, brand new
music,
brand new music bed. Even under the intro, we're growing. It's episode number 2, but it's already on an improvement. Neil is here. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. I feel like if in episode 2 we're changing the music, changing the graphics, by the time we get to episode 100,
what's gonna like?
I'll be blown away. Like I'm expecting
lights and sirens and rocket ships.
No, dance hall music. I'll be doing like the Bogle or something like that just to blow everybody's minds. But no, I'm happy because, you know, I listened to the podcast last week. I did so while I was working out on the exercise bike, just kind of getting in some cardio. And I thought it was fantastic. You guys did a great job. So I'm pretty excited to talk about, you know, what's going on this week and going into next week as well.
Yeah, yeah, again, if you're seeing it for the first time, guys, welcome, first of all. Again, as Sean mentioned, you asked for it, so we came through. It's the Markets Podcast. It's episode number 2, and there is a monumental amount of stuff to talk about that happened in only, we're recording this on Wednesday because of the Thanksgiving holiday coming up south of the border on Thursday. If you're watching this on the weekend, happy belated Thanksgiving. Happy Black Friday as well, and Cyber Monday is just around the corner. So we'll be maybe dropping some shopping plans coming up, but a little bit later on. I mean, as I mentioned, there's an absolute ton to talk about as far as the market is concerned. We were sitting around discussing earnings season over the past couple of weeks and winners and losers and what the actual reaction from the market was. We'll get into Nvidia coming up here, obviously the big headliner of this week. We'll also talk a little bit about Microsoft stealing the headlines essentially all week long because of this Sam Altman fiasco, absolute debacle of a mess that OpenAI comes through, actually going back to last Friday. We get a resolution this week. Sam Altman now firmly back in control of OpenAI. As the CEO, he has agreed to an investigation, Neil, into, I guess, part of the negotiations back and forth between the two. He agreed to an investigation that the board's going to conduct, the new board is going to conduct, into what actually led to his ouster in the first place, which will be interesting to see what the outcome is. But I got to kind of say and feel like if he agreed to do this anyways, I feel like we already know what the outcome is going to be.
Oh, he's good.
He had a little bit too much free reign, and they're trying to reel him back in here a little bit.
Yeah. So like, here's the thing, and if you follow this story, you probably follow Elon Musk. I'm going to make the assumption that a lot of people do, or at least you're aware of some of the things that he tweets out and the stories that he talks about. You'll know that he was a part of OpenAI. So if we take it a step back, now remember that OpenAI, obviously, everyone sees it now as something that's going to generate a lot of income, both for themselves and especially for Microsoft and potentially going forward.
Yeah.
But this started out as a nonprofit, and it has its roots in improving humanity and all of that good stuff. And the way the board was set up was along those lines. Elon was a part of that. Now, when there was this transition to, hey, we're going to start getting into the for-profit, and it's a bit of a change, some people left. Now, Elon's one of those people that left. Some people have probably heard about the fact that there is a little bit of a something between Altman and Elon. And if you are interested, I know he tweeted out a letter that he got from a former employee of OpenAI. And it's not for me, again, it's hearsay as far as I'm concerned. But if you're really interested in some of the nuts and bolts about what's going on and why Altman was going to be ousted, go ahead and read that. Take it for what it's worth. The truth being told here is Microsoft got what they wanted. That's what I get out of this. You know, the board didn't consult them, but you saw Satya Nadella come out pretty much right away being like, hey, whoa, let's negotiate something here. Let's get our guy back. We have this relationship. They're obviously the big driver behind them, and it wasn't just them. Now, we can talk about the employees that had left before, but when you talk about 770 people who are currently there, and 23 did not sign this letter. So you can say whatever you want about the past and what happened with Altman within that company and Brockman as well, But the truth being told, the people that are there working behind this potential behemoth all wanted him at the reins.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're a believer in that future, and if you're, to me, if you're a shareholder of Microsoft, I am, then I'm happy with this outcome. And I'll tell you, it's a fun story. I'm not making it up. When my dad came over to visit yesterday, he was just dropping something off. He was only there for 15 minutes, and all he wanted to talk about was the complete mess that this board had made. What a complete mess that they had made. But Microsoft seemed to shrug this one off. Up 1% today, baby.
Yeah, I mean it's been a soap opera, and I have a feeling it's not entirely over yet, or we haven't heard the last of it. A couple other interesting tidbits coming from this. The initial announcement, if you go back to 2 weeks ago Friday, when OpenAI came out and said that this was happening, they also said that Mira Murati, who was the then CTO, Chief Technical Officer, was taking over as CEO. She also signed that letter, was one of the 747 that signed that letter, saying that if he wasn't brought back immediately, she was going to be gone too. So they then announced on the weekend, going back to a week ago, last weekend, that the former head of Twitch was going to be the new CEO. So they do the swap out there. I mean, what happens to him now? He just gets a phone call randomly one night this week and says, sorry, not sorry, but pass, I guess. I just brought this up, just a quick Google
I think
search.
he'll be okay.
Yeah, he's fine.
I think he's good.
It's just, it's so embarrassing how they went about doing this. But here's how the new board's going to shape up over at OpenAI. Brett Taylor, former co-CEO and founder of Salesforce. Larry Summers, former U.S. Treasury Secretary, along with Quora CEO, current director Adam D'Angelo. Those are the new ones, obviously, in addition to the ones that were there before. But I mean, this is the statement, the joint statement, and can you tell it's a joint statement by the letterhead? Obviously, they wanted to obviously make it look like this. But I mean, Sharif was making some comments on the live show this week as well, to the fact that, if you go back to that Friday announcement from OpenAI, it was clear that, as Neil was just mentioning, there was no Satya Nadella opinion in that. They clearly had not talked to him about it, and right away we got his opinion, and very forcefully so, the resolution that he wanted.
Yeah, and I think that's going to catch a lot of people off guard. It's like, well, how did it come about that they made that decision without Satya Nadella, given the big partnership that they have, and people identify OpenAI and ChatGPT in some ways with Microsoft. You just launched the add-on, the Office 365, starting in November, in $30 a month, which is a big revenue driver. Well, maybe we'll get into that a little bit here. But it does start from what the roots of this company was. It was a not-for-profit with a certain ideology which survived primarily with the board. So in that kind of a light, and it's weird, this is what I told my dad. I have a certain respect for anybody that sticks to their principles and guns, if that's what it is. There were comments and at least rumors of things said along the lines of, well, if it takes the company completely falling apart or breaking down, this is what we believe, and all that kind of good stuff. If that's what you truly believe, then stick to your guns. But when you capitulate like this right away, it means, well, what did your principles really mean? At some point, you just have to be able to move on. This is the direction that it's heading. The people have spoken. Your partners have spoken. It makes no sense to most rational people. I shouldn't say any rational people. To most rational people, that you would be unwilling to consult Satya Nadella and Microsoft, but then you would immediately cave when everybody's up in arms. If you were willing to not consult them, then shouldn't you have had the courage of your convictions to allow this to play out? And even if it played out in an ugly way. To me, that's what principle is about. But again, that's just my personal opinion on the matter. I'm happy to see it's going the way that it is, being someone that I think is a little bit invested in the success of it going forward, of course, with Microsoft. So.
Yeah, two things that are kind of interesting here. One, we heard a lot going to the middle of last week about the potential of businesses that had already signed up with ChatGPT maybe taking their business elsewhere. And then shout out to Brendan Schema. Hope I'm saying that right. Great name, first of all. Second of all, great chart, highlighting the fact that leadership matters, and the performance, obviously all-time highs after this gets resolved last week for Microsoft. But the Steve Ballmer area produces a negative 26% return. Satya Nadella 886%.
Can we circle back? First of all, if you own Microsoft, there's nothing you are going to say that will make you unhappy with the current leadership. Okay, let's get that out of the way. But can we throw that chart back up for a quick second? So what we have here, and for anyone that's just listening in, essentially it's just showing the stock price or the stock price. Market cap doesn't really matter, but in this particular case, you're seeing a strong upward movement from 2014 since he took over, almost parabolically. Like, what is that, a climate chart? And then you have this languishing, some people would call it a happy face, during the Ballmer era. Well, 2000 to 2014, it was a different market. It was a different time in the company. I'm sure, if you look at it, it's not comparing apples to apples, in all defense of Steve Ballmer, who very energetic and amazing dancer, by the way. But it's not so simple as to say, hey, we were up since new leadership and you were languishing under Steve Ballmer. All that said, it's a performance-driven business. The chart speaks for itself. And when someone holds that much weight, and we're not just talking about the CEO of Microsoft. Microsoft, like it or not, Microsoft, Amazon, Apple, you can probably start to throw Nvidia into this, and you can certainly throw Tesla into this. These companies have such a strong breadth of influence within the markets, not just in their own spheres, but sort of outside of them. And we talk about the moat that Microsoft has involved in gaming and cloud and AI solutions and everything. What is it, like 300 million Office users or whatever it might be? They're a juggernaut, and they've got their hands in everything. The level of influence that exists is part and parcel to the reason why when the mouth gets opened, it gets listened to right away. And sometimes you just accept that is going to be the way that it is. So I'm happy to see a successful person get what they want when I'm an investor in this company. I think the market spoke pretty well today as well. Actually, not just today. If you look at the reaction as this saga was going on, just even looking at a 10 or 15-minute short-term chart, the market seemed to really like it when Altman was back and not like it when it was in question.
Yeah.
Right? So price action was telling you a little bit of the story as well.
Yeah, and I mean the investments, we've kicked this to death, but the investment from Microsoft into OpenAI, I think it's 13 billion or something at this point, a significant amount as far as what they own of the actual company. I guess the only question left is, Google's going to have something, obviously Microsoft's going to have something. There is going to be more than just one solution and one endpoint, to this quote unquote ChatGPT style AI or large language model. If it gets to a point where you're looking for something on the editorial side, or you're looking for something for writing or editing or research or things like that, you go to one tool. If you're looking for to make some travel plans and want to book a flight or hotel, you go to this tool. It's not going to be one.
There's going to be winners all over the place. In the midst of all of this, Anthropic just dropped, what is it called? It's the Claude 2.1 release. It was literally a few days ago. I don't know if anyone was paying attention because all of the headlines, it's great. All of the headlines were around this. It was about Altman, it was about the board, and it was about ChatGPT. But you've got competition out the wazoo, and mostly backed by some of the names that we were just talking about. We don't even mention some of the names in China, like Baidu doing their own thing. Everybody's got a piece of this puzzle. There's going to be multiple winners. The truth of the matter is this is going to touch all aspects of our lives, right? I can tell you from some personal experience, the company that my wife works with is a rather large conglomerate, and they're in the insurance business. The discussions around how they are integrating, and she works in a division under a brilliant AI executive there. I don't want to name drop him, so I'm not going to in this particular situation. But the discussions that they have are around how they can expand use right now to make sure that they are staying in lockstep with their competitors, and how they can protect data. You've heard that out of CRM. You've heard that out of every single company. So Google is going to win. Alphabet is going to win. Microsoft is going to win. Amazon is going to win. You don't always hear about all the big investments that are getting made, but trust me, Google's spending just as much money on this.
Yeah.
And it is,
if not more.
It's not going anywhere. We are in. I'm a baseball guy, so like, what is this? This is Vladdy's up in the first inning right now. There's a couple of.
I was even going to say they're still doing wind sprints in the outfield, warming up for the actual game. But
no, I'll say it's the bottom of the first inning with a couple of runners on base and some heavy hitters coming up. And I think that's where we're at. So this is a positive first step. As it relates to the market, everyone keeps talking about how the AI bubble is a little bit frothy. I think that's because a lot of money got thrown into some names that quite frankly, some people don't understand what they do. Not to throw a C3AI out there, but that's the first one that always comes to mind. Like, you are getting that kind of exuberance, but trust me when I tell you, you're going to look back in 10 years, and I don't think you're going to be unhappy with the players that are already monetizing this and making real dollars, as was evidenced today by Nvidia.
Let's move on. Tons to get to, ton to look at going into the Thanksgiving holiday weekend in the U.S. Again, shout out to our friends south of the border. Happy Thanksgiving. Hope everyone's having a wonderful holiday weekend. Let's talk some travel, because I saw a note going back to Wednesday, I think it was last week, that suggested that the government was expecting airports to see the highest amount of holiday travel this Thanksgiving weekend ever. So not only is travel back, but in a big way and bigger than ever. This is Boeing's chart right now. We'll touch on a couple angles here, obviously. Impressive to say the least. 180 was the bottom. We're all the way back to 220-ish for Boeing. Coming off of one of the world's largest air shows, the Dubai Air Show. And just to kind of give you some perspective on that, 2.5 trillion in deals get done at this show. 87,000 plus trade visitors at the show, 13,000 exhibitors. Like, this is the show of shows when it comes to actually getting deals done. So Boeing, obviously Airbus is there. Boeing shows up, absolutely steals the show when it comes to the amount of deals they got done, but also the volume in which these deals, representing in the amount of planes, obviously. Nice move. Obviously, the gap that we saw going back a week or so ago kind of kicked this off on pretty heavy volume. Remember, their earnings day, they got faded. So this is actually the earnings day going back to the end of November. Gaps up and then just got faded the entire day. Look where we are now for Boeing.
Yeah, wide body, baby. That's what one of the things that came out of that air show was, and it wasn't my quote, it was like there was some analyst that I heard say, it's wide body planes are back, right? Hey, look. When you're making big sales of the bigger names, that's what of the bigger jets, that's what's going to end up winning. Now, we talk about this as like an oligopoly all the time, because it's truly a two-horse race here oftentimes, and you're really just going to hear about Boeing and Airbus over and over again. But it's been a very big divergence in terms of the two. Like, it used to be. And as a bit of an old head myself, it's like, okay, well, Boeing is the winner and Airbus is like, they're the quality second company, right? For a long time, you could have said that, I suppose, about Coke and Pepsi, although, in some ways, Pepsi expanded. We won't get
what? You say that.
That's another story.
You say that, but I was actually reading a funny blog going back a week or so ago about Coke and Pepsi, and the fact that if you put Pepsi in a Coke can, people still vote for it as if it's Coke. And they had actual data and results to support that.
Oh, come on, son. So, okay, we're gonna digress for a second.
Anyways,
you can definitely taste the difference between Coke and Pepsi, and it's not even close. If you put Pepsi,
a blind test, Pepsi in a Coke can versus Coke in a Coke can.
That's the dumbest. Okay, first of all, okay, no. I'm calling shenanigans on that.
I'm just the messenger.
No, I'll read it because it sounds like an interesting study. But first things first, if you put Pepsi in my rum and Coke, then I'm gonna sip it and I'll be like, oh, thank you. I'll be polite about it for a hot minute. But like, you better have at least warned me that that was going to happen, because it is what it is, which is weird because I own Pepsi stock. But I don't drink pop a lot, but I drink Coke. And that just gets us down a rabbit hole if we start comparisons. There's so many interesting brand comparisons you can make along those lines. But suffice to be said, let's leave it at they used to be the winner, Boeing. I mean, at least clearly. And now you're seeing a little bit of a gap that came back in terms of Airbus's favor.
Yeah.
But what's striking to me about this move, just because you put the chart up, and I want to highlight this as well on the daily chart. It's not often that you see this type of linear movement to the downside. Like 240 to 180 was a heck of a ride that I think only day traders would have been happy with. Right? Because when we do the day trader, you can just be shorted all the time.
Wake up short. Wake
on
up
the way,
short.
yeah,
wake up short.
Look for the short until it goes. So I'm looking at a daily chart which shows you, for anyone listening in, basically 240 going into like middle of August, and then straight down with about, like 3 or 4 times where it had more than 1 or 2 up days in a row, all the way down into a 180 coming into the end of October here. And since it made that bottom, it's all the way back into 220. Like it's moved up 25%, almost as fast, actually faster in terms of a rate basis on that bounce. So it seems to me that money's been looking for an opportunity to come back in to Boeing, and was looking for not just a little bit of positive news, but to have the pile-on. Because we had seen reactions out of Boeing, at least as a trader, where it would get a piece of news, it would rally for a day or two, and then it would just go back to falling to the downside. And as someone who has and does still own shares of it, has been like, it's very frustrating.
Yeah.
Now there's real momentum behind it. And now all of a sudden you can start to see, okay, there's a future here. And I just want to point something out, because we actually languish and talk all about Boeing in terms of how they do. It's like, oh, how many jets are they selling? Like, we're only talking 40% of their business here.
Yeah.
Right? And,
no, it's a great point.
Just to look at it, like from commercial airplanes, 40%. Defense and space security, 34%. 26 out of global services. Now highlight that second one. I'm not gonna. Anyone here can understand why defense spending is good to have, right? It only ever goes up. People usually you don't really cut defense spending in certain places in the world. I'm just going to throw that one out there.
Not these days.
Especially these days.
Yeah.
So that is a healthy chunk of their business. Now, it would be nice if they could do some catch up in space, because quite frankly, Elon, I love you, SpaceX is owning everything. What did they raise at $150 billion valuation again with another raise today? When are you going public with that, Elon? Because I'd love to own some shares. But they've been falling behind. There's room to catch up, but there's plenty of winners to be had, especially when you look long term. I'm a big science fiction guy. I'm one of those true believers that some of the applications that are going to come out of the space program in terms of mining asteroids and what you can learn from developing, like Elon talks about going into Mars, and was like, why would you want to go to Mars and this and that? Well, because when you conquer that frontier, the technology that you're able to develop in chasing that is so otherworldly applicable to some of the problems that we have here. Like anybody that's watched one of those SpaceX automatic landings, if you can see that and then not understand why Tesla is so far ahead in terms of being able to win, building things that you didn't think they could do effectively. They're going to have their automated driving. They're going to get that rolled out, and they're going to be a winner there as well. This comes from pushing the envelope. There is a reason why you have to take those chances. Yeah. So I personally, I'm a believer. I want them to keep it. I want to see GE. I said GE. I want to see Boeing continue to invest.
They make engines.
No, they do. Yeah, I mean, GE is another example here as well that I think they could benefit from this. But you want to push the envelope, and I think space, defense are good places for them to continue to grow, because you never know what's going to come out of it. You've got to also be thinking about the future here. And I'm glad they've gotten off the schneid. I think they have some competitive advantages to Airbus, and a big one is going to be that 1/3 of their business, which is defense and space, et cetera.
Yeah, completely agree. I went down a rabbit hole on Instagram Reels, just going back to that, the re-entry, the re-entry of those rockets.
Goodness.
People have started posting, just videos from cell phones even, and you can hear the sonic booms when they re-enter the atmosphere. and then the booster as it comes on, as the actual rocket comes down to land. It's insane.
It's nerd porn, man.
No,
It
it's
is nerd
really,
porn.
really cool.
Just watch it if you've never seen it.
I just want to go back to this chart real quick, just to circle back to Boeing and Airbus. Sharif and I were actually having an interesting conversation last week about these two. And if you have done air travel, I mean, from Canada, and I'm only going to talk about Air Canada because that's typically what we use here for the most part, unless you're going domestic, maybe WestJet comes into play. But on that note, it seems that the more shorter haul domestic type flights, you end up on an Airbus. On longer haul, if you're going to Europe or wherever, you end up on a Boeing. Just an interesting observation from that fact. But that chart shows you exactly what you were talking about, in that look at how these two have come together after, I mind you, there was a lot of reasons why Boeing had this move down, a few crashes,
Yes.
some, China restrictions that are still in place to this date. But look at how these two have come together, 110 now versus 124. If you rewind the clock, I mean, Airbus is still basically where it was going back to 2020, pre-pandemic. Boeing was 200 plus billion.
So look, you're looking at that chart, you're talking about 20 to 20, I think it's 23 years on that chart of a clear correlation between the market caps of those two companies. However, and we'll put this in the appendix, if you're watching live, you'll be able to see this. Any divergence that happens with Boeing accelerating and growing more. And I think that has a little bit to do with its, the simple fact that they are a little bit more multifaceted. But either way, like sometimes you just understand the trend is what it is. When it gets going, it tends to have more upside. That's why I personally would rather own them than Airbus. So when I see them consolidate like this, you just need a little bit of an inch to the upside. If we can go back to that chart, for anybody that is following in here, one of the things that you will be able to notice about that is when they've compressed together, when they start to separate, Boeing ends up being a good winner. It doesn't mean that they're not both going up, but you have very clearly seen more explosive growth out of Boeing. And some of that, now I don't know how much of this lends into when you talk about the difference between European and American companies. And anybody that's invested or trading in the market for some time has known you get growth out of the US, you get boring and stable out of Europe. And that's not to say it's always true, but most times like, hey, European stocks look like a good value, you do that and then you miss out on a big rip in the SPY or something like that. So I think there's a little bit of that playing into it, but the charts speak for itself. When I see that, I see explosive upside in Boeing relative to Airbus. They can both be winners. One historically has tended to outperform the other in terms of growth when we do have a bit of a bullish sentiment in their overall sector.
I'm not going to sit here and say I know anything about planes because I know absolutely nothing about planes. But from a pure experience standpoint, there's very little difference between the two. Like if you get on an Airbus and sit in economy or wherever you want to sit versus getting on a Boeing and sit in the, would you even have an idea of what plane it was?
Brendan, I can't tell.
Exactly.
There is 0% chance.
Exactly.
Now, I will say this, and if anyone, like I have one of my cousins, a couple of my cousins are pilots. One he's flown commercial, he's flown cargo, he's flown private jets. He's got the stories about him flying private jets. Oh man, it's a lot of fun. You know what? I'd probably have to get his permission to tell.
Not a bad job.
I would actually have to get his permission to tell some of those stories. But it's a very, very interesting job. Imagine who you'd be flying. But he can point to a plane in the sky, be like, "This is that plane," blah blah blah, and then he'll start telling you everything you need to hear about it. But that's because he's a pilot. You're not telling the difference if you're flying in one of those things. All you care about is, do I get there and how much did it cost, right? So as long as both of these companies are managing a way to make more efficient planes, which have better fuel economy, and you're able to haul a bunch of people in a cost-effective manner, that's what they got to be able to do. Boeing, of course, has other ways to make money. It's said it's only 40% of their business, but all in all, when you have an oligopoly, why would there be a lot of differentiation, right? If the major airlines were buying these types of commercial jets from 7 different companies, you'd have a little bit more flavor. But truth be told, let's be real, anybody that had an economics class knows what I'm talking about here. When you have an oligopoly, the shit's going to be the same. I can say that, right? It's going to be the same.
You can say whatever you want.
No, it's a podcast. I'll say whatever
good.
I want. What differentiation are you going to get? Not a heck of a lot. So, they can both definitely win here, but yeah, I mean, the next time I can tell which plane I'm on will be the first.
And that's the part that I find so amazing about this is that, like, when you get actually down to the customer experience, I mean, I guess airlines have a lot to do with that, and the experience for the customer has a lot to do with how good the airline is. But anyways, let's continue along here because Sean and I, if you go back to episode number 1, make sure you go back to episode number 1 and watch that as well. We touched on the EV group a ton and really got into some interesting facts here. And yes, I'm going to boost Sharif's ego here again and talk about Li Auto, but I want to talk about some Chinese EV news from this week. We showed that, what was that thing called? The Mega? The Xpeng Mega was a god-awful minivan.
Do we have a picture of that?
No, we're not going there again. I want to talk about...
No, because it looks... no, okay, that's fine. I
want to
talk
about...
it looked ridiculous.
Yeah, let's talk about insurance. Okay. Something even more boring, I think, than that.
Don't tell my wife that.
Right.
She's in insurance.
She works in insurance. I forgot.
Yeah.
So, anyways, this is NIO's chart right now on a daily time frame. Obviously, it's been stuck in this range for months and months and months, right at basically long-time lows. You got to go back to May of last year to figure out where that support is coming from. But we had a few headlines, as I mentioned this week, from the insurance realm. One from Tesla and one from NIO, possibly venturing into the insurance business. Shout out to Sharif with this chart as well. There's Li Auto, insurance registrations for new car makers in China. Not even close, Sharif. 10,000 for Li Auto, the closest 4,500 from Leap Motor.
Yeah, Leap, that's, look, they're the ones partnered with Stellantis, right? So,
No, but I mean, the point here is that...
Well, where's NIO on
the ones we talk about all the time are...
where are you?
Yeah, not even to be found.
I know.
I mean, they're in the middle. They're in the middle.
Yeah, they're diddling in the middle at, well, whatever. You guys saw the chart. It was like 10,000 for Li Auto. NIO chilling out at 3,700. Hey, that's not bad, but you're behind Xpeng, Leap Motor. The chart tell you everything you need to know about those two companies. I mean,
It's been a mess.
I mean, like at the end of the day, and let's maybe like take a step back for a second. The good thing about the EV business in China is that if you look at all of the turmoil that was going on, all the crackdowns on private industry and mostly in tech, there's been a strong push for electric vehicles in China, supported by the government. There is a lot of uptick in terms of demand for it. So there's like that's not the problem. Like I don't think you don't necessarily have the same types of concerns with the Chinese EV names that you would have. Maybe wondering why Alibaba won't go up, or some of the tech names. Some of that's been abated recently, and it is continuing to get better. You also have all these companies trying to venture into Europe, which is a fascinating and a good market for them. Anyone that's been to Europe would have an understanding of EV adaptation being important there, maybe more fast-tracked than it is on this side of the pond here in North America. But as to why, if you ever wanted to exemplify what a chart is telling you the story, don't try to be smarter than the market, Li Auto to NIO is pretty much exactly that. So I have a daily chart up of Li Auto that I'm just going to zoom out, and what it shows for anyone that's just listening in, if I go back to the end of 2022, it made a bottom at about $13, and then at the beginning of this year, it made a higher low at about $18, $19. It has been in a constant upward trend since, even when the market pulled back and it failed highs. And we talked about this stock ad nauseum breaking down at $38 for a flat bottom break, which was gorgeous and gave you 25%. Right? That's all anyone was talking about with Li Auto was the flat bottom break and how good the short's going to be. It gave you 25%. We're right back at 40, and we're back above that level. Meanwhile, this is not to pick on NIO, but when you make a point like this, you've got to show the most important name. Meanwhile, NIO made similar bottoms going all the way back to the end of 2022 and is back underneath them, suffice to say. So you have a couple of names in a growing sector, one of which has been making higher highs and higher lows, the other of which is consistently testing its 52-week bottom. Now, they are very different models. As Sharif, who's on our program, on our main show, He's on all day. He does our educational segment as well. He's a shareholder of Li Auto, as he will remind you ad nauseum.
No, he's
about.
not. I've never heard that
He knows
before.
the company better than I do. They have a bit of a they have a bit of a blended model where there is right now their offerings have an actual traditional gas-powered engine, which essentially just powers the electric motor and gives you a bit of a backup, which is interesting. They're going to make some fully electric vehicles which don't have that. NIO, of course, does the battery swapping, so their models are completely different. But in almost every single way, you are seeing some clear winners and losers out of this space. For a long time, it's been BYD. You know that Tesla has had some success in China. Li Auto looks like they are the one. I mean, XPeng's had doing some good things.
Yeah.
XPeng, the Tesla clone.
Yeah.
XPeng's
not doing good things.
Okay, well,
XPeng Mega just needs to mega go away.
Okay, but you know how I felt about it, and we're not fine. We're not showing a picture of the new XPeng and
I refuse to.
And of the.
It's made its last
the new
appearance
Li Auto.
on this program.
But my whole thing was it was less ugly than Li Auto's, simply because XPeng kind of copies a lot of Tesla designs. It seems like to me, and Tesla makes good stuff, and Tesla makes things that are ergonomically appealing when they drive down the road. Like, I'll tell you right now, the first time, and it's always things come back to Tesla. The very first time I saw Tesla, you're like, wow. And then the first time there was one in my neighborhood, I'm like, well, maybe I want a Tesla. And then when I was in Europe, when I was in Paris, after I'd say 2 hours in Paris, I was like, I haven't seen a Tesla yet. Like, why in the hell did that come into my mind? Why? Because their brand is amazing. They don't even advertise.
Yeah.
And they're in my brain.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that Li Auto is going to be the next Tesla. Tesla is Tesla. But if one of these two, between Li Auto and NIO, is going to win, well, you put up a chart that showed 3x, what was it, like 2.5 times the number of insurance registrations. I show you a chart that is bullish on Li Auto. I see one that is bearish on NIO, and they're trying to do things in a different way. I know which one I would be backing, and we all know which one Sharif is going to be backing.
Stick around for Sharif coming up next.
He's on next week. And, here's the thing. For everyone that's watching this, I'm gonna make a gentlemanly and friendly bet with Brennan right now that he's not going to accept. But I'm willing to bet $1 or 20 push-ups or something ridiculous. I'll eat a pineapple pizza, whatever it might be. That regardless of what the topics are, Sharif will mention the fact that he owns Li Auto next week on the podcast.
More than once.
Anyone listening in, trust me when I tell you, you're going to hear about that from him.
Yeah, he's proud. But good for him. He nailed it. So
as he should be.
Yeah.
He nailed that one. You should be proud of it.
Let's talk Tesla. You mentioned it a couple times. A couple things to note for Tesla outside of their SpaceX, another rapid disassembly. But I mean, the actual shuttle got to space. So progress for SpaceX. They came out this week and said as well they're going to sell shares at $150 billion for SpaceX.
Boom.
Market cap. So shout out to Elon continuing to win. Here is the daily chart of Tesla. Obviously, just wild as Tesla always is. But guess what next week is?
Delivery time.
It's Cybertruck delivery time.
When's yours coming?
How about never? I was saying to Sean last week, I would not want to be the first one to have one of these things in not only this city, but any city. Because Ramin just said why. Because, Ramin, you're not going to be able to go anywhere or park that thing anywhere in this city without drawing a crowd. Anyways, let's talk about the event coming up next week, because it's going to be potentially a tradable event. Tech Radar here saying that it could be seriously underwhelming, and that might be on a numbers standpoint, because we still sitting here today don't actually know how much they're going, or how many they're going to actually deliver at the event the coming days. A lot of people were pointing to the fact that maybe we'll learn more about how many are obviously going to happen at the event, how many are going to come in the coming days. But over under 50 by the end of the year?
I want it to be over. The thing about this is you almost have to rewind back to the conference call, because anybody that's listened to some Tesla conference calls over the years, the exuberance and just, you know, like Elon being Elon, it was sometimes it was so much that they would tell him to back down. He's like, I'm not going to be as much involved.
They
in the
actually
conference
kicked
call.
him off.
They kicked him off that
yeah.
crap, and it's like, hey, that was
he wasn't allowed.
Most of the entertainment. But his tone on the last call was very, and it was, some of it had to do with his outlook on the economy, and that's why, I mean, margins have been pulling back, which he was very candid about. But also, he did say that you got to temper some expectations when it comes to the Cybertruck. When it comes to, both how much they're going to initially make off of it, they're going to lose for a bit, and he was very candid about that. And you could see some, we could see some delays. We might not get the ramp up that we're excited about. And you ask yourself, how much could that be priced into the stock right now? Generally speaking, my gut with Tesla is not as much as it should be when it comes to downside. So, I'm not overly optimistic personally going into it. I think it's more likely to be a disappointment than not.
Agreed.
And that's because I trust Elon. If he's being pessimistic about something, I'm not usually thinking he's going to be he's not going to BS. If you can say whatever you want about him, but he's very, very candid when he wants to be, right? So,
but also calculated in that.
Calculated as well. That's the perfect part, and it's one of the things I personally respect about him. If we can come back to the daily chart, because this is something that I want to point out, because this has been, I'm showing a daily chart, and it's since 2022, but I'm going to zoom it in so you can see at the July high, we broke out, touched 300 at the July high. Since then, you can draw a line straight like an arrow in a downward channel if you wanted to. And then you could do the same thing from the low into the July high and draw a channel that hasn't touched the bottom. But essentially, you've got this deep channel going on for the second half of the year in a downward push. The good news is, anybody pulling up an AMD chart, seeing when a channel like that breaks, how good it can be, that's a positive if it can get back above 250 in the next couple of weeks. So the price action could be an explosive upside push if there is a surprise. Yeah. However, the trend is your friend to the end when it bends, as a wise man once said on our program. But first things first, I want to... Actually, no, I meant to say this. I would like to nominate my friend Sean Katina to at least sub in for Elon the next conference call so we can pump the stock up a little bit more. Because I actually do believe there's a certain aspect to Tesla that is the cult of Elon. And at some times, if he's not just energetic, but if he's not as exuberant about the short term, you can see some kind of a pullback. There are times when you want the CEO to exude a certain level of confidence, right? In the company, in the outlook, in what they are producing. Not necessarily unrealistic arrogance, but I want to hear that confidence. I know he's confident. Everybody knows that, but sometimes you want to hear that come through on the call. It's good to be candid, but I think sometimes when short sellers smell weakness in Tesla, they love to pile into it based on the valuation, and some of that is fair if you value it as a car company. Yeah. I don't want to rehash that debate. Yeah. If you're an investor at price levels like this, you probably don't think of it as just a car company. I will leave it at that. I don't. So there's a lot of people that are in that camp. If you think it should be valued like any other EV name, then maybe they should be trading at relative lows on the year, but they're not. And that's why they're not trading down at those levels, frankly, as far as I'm thinking. If I had to think about what's going to happen for this launch, I'm telling you, I'm just going into it cautiously. I'm not buying any shares of this until after. You know what? I probably don't buy this until next year again because I want to see how this plays out. Maybe even another quarter.
Yeah, I think you got to own it. It's a matter of where. You mentioned the autonomous side of things and the self-driving, taxi side of things. That alone, I think, and I mean, Kathy Wood has been pounding the table on this as well. That alone, and the data that they collect off of these cars on a daily basis. It's when someone solves this autonomous driving problem, it's going to be, chances are it's going to be Tesla, simply because the massive amount of data that they collect from these cars that are driving around all day, every day, all over the world.
On that point, just one last thing on that particular point. Like, who's going to win when it comes to that? Like, anybody who's had a travel experience driving, if you use Google Maps versus Apple, why do you think Google Maps is better than Apple Maps? Because they've got more data and they don't care about following you around. And Apple's better. Apple is great for privacy. But let's be real, man. I mean, Google's just got way more active real-time data tracking a bunch of people to be able to tell you the best and fastest route.
Yeah.
So that's the Tesla advantage when it comes to automated driving. They just collected the data, and that just puts them ahead. So if you're trying to pick a winner in that space, I like a few names. It's like Tesla way up there. You know, Uber is going to benefit from it.
Yeah.
I would tell you I like Mobileye to a lesser extent. You just had an absolute mess with Cruise over at GM. So who are you going to bet on? I'm going to bet on who has the big data.
Yeah, you got to own it. It's just a matter of where. And one of those ones you put in your pocket and revisit months, years down the road.
Give it to your kids.
Let's keep going here. NVIDIA, obviously the headliner this week when it comes to earnings. We finally get NVIDIA. They typically show up at the end of the earnings reporting season with a report that, once again, was absolutely astronomical. It does get sold, as it did the last time as well, off the earnings report. But I found this chart today, and I didn't get who it was from, but credit to whoever came up with this because it's pretty impressive. Can you see where AI became a thing?
Well, first of all, looking at that chart, I'm not sure, but it's going to show you somewhere in the last, okay, it's showing you 2020 all the way to 2024, and it's going to be quarterly revenue by NVIDIA. Now, it broke the you-know-what out in the last few years, and if you look at the projections for 2024, we just had, what, 16 billion they were just talking about?
I mean, they're talking 20
They're talking
for Q4.
20 billion, 13 to 16 to 20. But I want to shout out, this is from, like, the charts from Statista, but I believe we pulled it from a tweet from TrendSpider. So just give the credit on Twitter, or X, sorry, Elon, on X to TrendSpider. But that is explosive growth. The craziest thing about it is it didn't even move the needle today.
No, it got sold. As it did last time.
It got sold just like last time. Now it didn't get sold off that much. There were buyers. There were buyers on the aftermarket dip at 470. Shadow, watch our aftermarket show. Pretty much every single day that we're not shooting the podcast, we have our aftermarket show with Sean. When he's off, I will be in his stead. But there was a great call on the 470 level from Brian Shannon using AVWAP there for that bottom. It's a good technical level. If you're going to be trading in the aftermarket, you should have some good reasons to do so, and a good level was pointed out there. So it did bounce. It ended up holding well above that 470 level. Ultimately, we didn't really get back above 500, but I'd say it's relative for a stock what people call overvalued. It's been trading pretty healthy up here. Right? When you had the big gap, the initial ridiculous gap up, and I'm looking at a daily chart right now, which shows you how it just floated from 300 to 400 and has been bouncing 400 to 500 essentially since the middle of the year. If you go to the beginning of the summer, after that big consolidation off those big highs, we've been holding 400, stalling 500. So the fact that you couldn't push through this top on earnings, which were fantastic, that everybody was expecting to be fantastic, I can see some of that making some sense. I think there was a bit of a balance between profit takers, people that made some outsized bets expecting a big move, needing to unwind. Everybody was able to probably come out of this unscathed after this earnings report. Now we just sit back, digest the next couple of weeks. We're at big levels on the Qs as well, and see whether or not we're holding up. Could we retrace all the way back to 400? I think that's a possibility. I'd be a little surprised if we got all the way back to 400 and didn't test under it. That would be shocking to me, because you don't bounce off a level that cleanly this often, reject the high again, and not have some paper hands and some skittish people if we were to retrace 25% after that kind of a quarter. If after this quarter they're going to retrace another 25% to 400, I think you test underneath it this time. It doesn't mean that I'd be selling the stock under 400. I'm not selling this. I'm giving it to my daughter. When she goes, or whatever the hell, I'm just holding on to it forever. But I think if you do retest all the way back then, it could mean some trouble if you were to break that. But
let's get
growth is what you want.
Yeah, let's get into the nitty-gritty here, because there's a couple of interesting aspects to this. One is, and you saw a lot of analysts that came out after the earnings report talking about the simple fact that the growth rate is insane, and it's just not sustainable going forward. So what happens the first time that they show up with something that is not what they said it was going to be? So that's A. B is, I feel like this entire space is going to get to a point where, similar to smartphones, similar to your laptop, your tablets, your whatevers, there's going to be constant upgrades. There's going to be a cycle, I guess, of the latest, the greatest. So the question becomes, how fast can they then make the next one that's so much better than the one everyone has now, that forces all of these AI companies to go out and have to rebuy them? I'm by no means a semiconductor expert, but if this cycle ends up being 3 years, 5 years, is it 6 or 8 years down the road before everyone has to do a complete rollover to the next latest and greatest? What does that mean for the stock between now and then?
I think it's going to be a tricky stock for a lot of people to trade. I put my faith in it being $1 trillion opportunity for all of those GPUs that are in this space. They just put out that H200 recently, which, by the way, I was long armed like 7 times today and should never have been out of the long when I think about the fact that they also talked about, hey, our new GPUs that everybody wants got that ARM technology in them, and ARM was actually explosive today. So I want to get that one out of the way because I think they're going to be a bit of a winner as well in this space. I think it's going to be tricky to time that because you're absolutely right about the upgrade cycle, and there's nothing you can do about it. There is going to be a disappointment in terms of growth. It's going to happen, and at this valuation,
it's not sustainable.
There is going to be a week that it's down 20 to 25%. It's going to happen at some point in the future, the nature of which it trades. But you've got to have the long picture in mind here, in that when you have something like an 80 to 90% share of such a vastly growing business, which we've just described as being in the first inning, or as you said in the warm-ups, give it whatever analogy you want, then you're willing to deal with those hiccups. Now, this is probably a horrible analogy to make, but think of, and it is in some ways it's a horrible analogy, but I love extreme examples to prove a point or to make a point. It's just to look at Bitcoin, right? If you think about the level of volatility that it had, I'm just talking about things with explosive growth. The level of volatility in the beginning, where it was going from pennies to dollars to thousands, and then where it ended up getting to once it shook itself out in the beginning. If you got shaken out in that volatility when you believed in the long term, well, then you missed out on something. I believe if you're making investments in AI, you just want to be you want to be in there and holding them. If you want to trade around this, then worry about the technicals and do that. Do not try to marry those two things. I think you're going to get yourself into a world of hurt because there will be some really big outsized moves when these guys miss. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But when you talk about an opportunity that big, $1 trillion overall market space, right now, if you're going to tell me they have 80% and it's going to go down to 50, but we're going to get explosive growth in AI over the next 25 years, you got to be okay with that.
Somewhere.
It's an expanding pie that they've got a leadership on. We just talked about Tesla. How is that any different?
Yeah.
Tesla's not gonna have the same share of the market today as it will in 10 years, but then there's going to be 10 times more EVs out there. So, there's going to be a much bigger spend from all of these companies. They're going to have to do this. Nobody is getting away. AI is going to be an aspect of every single industry that you can even imagine, and probably a few that we haven't thought of yet. That's the truth. So don't try to time it. There's going to be some pain along the way here with Nvidia. There's no question about that. But long run, I think we're good.
I think we bookend it with all things AI. One on the personnel to start, one on the hardware to wrap things up. We started something last week that I think will continue throughout. And going into a holiday weekend, it's a perfect opportunity to talk about this one thing. This one thing can be anything in any form that has made your life better recently. Give me your this one thing, Neil.
Okay, so this is an interesting one because I heard you talk about this last week, and you mentioned that you had the shade, the sleeping shade.
Yeah, sleep mask.
Right, and you got the sleep mask.
Hell
Whoop.
yeah.
So I wear a Whoop, by the way. It tracks my sleep. For anyone that's watching this for the first time, you don't know TraderTV.Live. I do talk about this from time to time. I track how I sleep because I've been a terrible sleeper for most of my life. I've always been an early riser, no problems. I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning when I was in high school, or I was doing it when I was in junior high and grade school as well, believe it or not. I get up at 4:30 every single day on weekdays. On the weekends, I get up. I've just always been that person, but I tend not to sleep through the night very well, and this has helped tremendously for that. I have never done a sleep mask, but I will tell you this. ever since I've done a few things, and one of them, you guys see me with my blue light glasses from time to time when I'm looking at too many screens, but we've shifted to a bit of a weighted blanket.
Same.
When we're sleeping and adjusting the temperature down.
Game changer.
So, and a good friend of mine, and I want to shout out to my good friend Angel, who has been, like, ever since I've talked about these issues, he's the one of the people that got me onto the Whoop and said I should be doing these things. He recommended the mask. I don't do it, but he said the weighted blanket, and make sure you can do a cooling one if you want.
Yeah.
And then keep the temperature a little bit lower. The quality of my sleep improved instantaneously. I'm getting more REM. I'm getting more deep. I'm having less wake events. My general awake time isn't as good. Most of the time it's when my daughter comes in and she's like, Daddy, I had a nightmare. I'm like, okay, sweetheart, all good. Because one day she's not going to want to do that. And just on a personal, because now I'm going to digress a little bit, all those little things where I spoil my daughter, she's like, oh, you want to come sleep in our bed? You want me to read you the stories till you go to sleep? I do all of them, and I don't care how old she gets. If she asks, the answer is going to be yes, because I am terrified of one thing. I don't know what day she will stop asking me. I don't know the last day she's going to want me to hold her. I don't know the last day that she's going to want me to read a story to her, and that it terrifies me. So I allow her all of these things, and I probably spoil her in that regard. But I feel like you just got to do it because I'm getting choked up talking about it because I get terrified by it. But as you said, we're talking about the one thing. My one thing is a weighted blanket.
Oh, yeah.
If you have trouble sleeping, I don't care what kind you get. Just do it. You'd be surprised at how less you're going to toss and turn, and it does give you better sleep. And sleep is everything. If you are a trader, which we're all traders here, then you want to have a sharp mind and you want to be well rested the next day when you got to go be able to do battle. It's a mental war. So that's mine.
Yeah, there's a Canadian company. It's in Toronto. I forget the name of it right now, but they have one that's called the ice blanket.
Yeah.
So it's a weighted blanket, but it's cooling at the same time. But no, they're fantastic.
You should try it, Fabian.
Completely agree. So on that note, I know it's super trendy, but I just started it and am having unbelievable results from it. Cold exposure. I'm not doing it from a ice bath perspective. I'm literally getting to the end of a shower in the morning and turning the hot water off and standing there as long as I can take it. I'm telling you, it's better than coffee.
Okay, so I 100% agree with you. I will tell you this, I ran track when I was younger. I ran track in university. And so I was often injured. My high school friends made fun of me. We had 5 years of high school. Back then they had a 5th year if you wanted to go to university here in Ontario, Canada, where we are. And in my 5 years of running track in high school, I had 2 healthy seasons. I was tearing hamstrings, I was tearing ligaments out the wazoo. When I ran track, I was constantly hurt. So I know a thing or two about ice baths. They are painful, but doing hot cold is very therapeutic. I'm with you on that. I do it. I actually take cold showers after I work out, so I'm with you on that one. I have not done those ice buckets. A good friend of Sean and myself, he's renovating his new house. He's putting,
I'm telling you,
he's got a sauna in there. He's getting the cold bath.
Yes.
And I'm not making this crap up. Every year we have a loser in our fantasy football league, and then we call him the butler. At the beginning, it made sense at the beginning because they actually had to not just buy the food for the draft. They had to actually serve you. We did it all. Like, they had to wear the apron, and they would sit there like, what would you like? And they were serving you food and drinks. You know, everyone gets older and a little more prideful, and that's actually stopped. But the butler this year has to do a 3-minute dip in the cold ice bath at our draft.
Sign me up. No, it's great. No, I'm serious. It's, and I know there's.
What's the longest you've done?
I've actually read a lot of data, and I don't want to quote anyone because I'm not a scientist and know nothing about this, but I've read a lot of data that actually says colder is not necessarily better, and you get the same reaction and the same benefits from different temperatures along the way. Again, I don't believe anything I'm saying because I'm nowhere near a scientist or know anything about this, but again, I know it's super trendy, but I just started doing it, and it's been an absolute game changer in my life. So we'll wrap it up with that. Episode 2 in the books. Well done.
It's episode 2. We got to say, look, we're taping this the day before U.S. Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving.
So happy Thanksgiving, everybody. If you're consuming this on Saturday, I hope you had a happy Thanksgiving and you don't, don't eat too much leftover
No, eat
turkey
too
if
much.
that's what you're into.
Be in a coma.
My whole thing is to eat way too much pumpkin pie because that is what Thanksgiving is about. Family first, football second, pumpkin pie third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, and all that good stuff.
Episode 2, the Markets Podcast, guys. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.
Oh, that was fun.